Welcome, welcome. So welcome to our weekly 8FM book club on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. It's 3 p.m. for me. It's 7 a.m. for Terry. I'm not sure what time it is for Alicia and Dawn. But welcome
it's
on.
4 here.
Four
yeah, I'm about to go get my girl. So
okay, cool.
Yeah.
So welcome on, and we're continuing today with our discussion of influence, and we are on chapter 3, commitment and consistency, hobgoblins of the mind. And I have to find that quote. I found that quote really interesting. Who was it from? Can't remember. Let me just find it. Consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. Ralph Waldo Emerson. So personally, this chapter for me has, I've read this before, and just like rereading it, it really affected me the most. For me, it's that point of that inner choice. And I just found all of the case studies and everything he talked about fascinating, right? And kind of going from this point of like beginning with things that are, even like with the Americans as prisoners of war, right? And the things that they did, but it's like these little commitments that were made, and up to the point of like, where people go through like massive physical kind of trials, and all of it has to do with this shift in our self-image and who we see ourselves as. Like, I found that just fascinating, like that our self-perception is what creates that consistency from this need to appear consistent in front of other people and ourselves. And so it's kind of like, it fascinates me, because it's like we even to that point where it's like we rationalize things that we do, and we could rationalize those things forever, but they may or may not be right, or they may or may not be even to our greatest benefit, right? It's like, it's amazing what we can convince ourselves of, and then just do everything possible to stay consistent with that. Right? So that's, so many things to talk about here, but, whoever wants to pop on, let's start the discussion. What do you guys think? Whoever wants to pop up.
Yeah, I found that point so fascinating, that you can make a decision, and then to stay consistent with your own self kind of image, or in the eyes of others, you justify or you defend that position, even if you might not actually really believe that, or you might have made that decision in the moment but not really thought it through, but you kind of defend the decision to stay consistent, because of that drive to stay consistent inside ourselves is so strong. We can end up kind of like, defending a decision we made, that's, not necessarily what we believe. But on the other hand, it means that if we make a decision, we can actually follow through with it really powerfully. If we've kind of committed to something and it does resonate with us, we can go to the ends of the earth to follow through on that commitment, to stay consistent as well. Like, it's a strength and it's sort of both parts of that perspective on that following through. That's just one point that I found fascinating.
Yeah. And welcome on, Elizabeth. We're discussing chapter 3 of influence. Okay. Dawn, I don't know, it looked like you were going to unmute. I don't know if you were.
Oh, I unmuted. I found the parts about the hazing were exceptionally strong. If you've read any military books about like the Navy SEALs, U.S. Navy SEALs, Lone Survivor, or American Sniper, and they give the entire training course of what they go through to become a Navy SEAL, and it's like shared hardship forges a bond between like people, and that's why the colleges are so reluctant, or the frats at the colleges are so reluctant to give up this process, because once they've got all these people who shared the same experience, they're all like, committed members, And if they change it, then the new people come in, they'll be like, the people who are already in will not be tolerant of the people who are coming in because they haven't had the same shared experience. So I thought that was very powerful too.
And it makes me think of business, right? Like how, we can develop cultures, right, within different settings, like within our business, for example, and how it's the same process. People can develop an identity with it and perceive themselves as someone. Like, for example, for me, I do perceive myself as someone that is committed to Empower Network and have been in it for a long time, and I won't leave. And, and I ask myself too, like, is it the need to appear consistent? Is it something that, because it makes me think about that, right? Is it a self-image that I created, right? But then on the other side of that, it's like, because the way he looks at things, I don't know, there's this undertone, right? There's this constant undertone where he's trying to outdo or outsmart the people that are trying to outsmart him with these influence tactics, right? But then on the other side of that, like when we look at, what we learn also from, Will Wood and things like that about belief structures and changing beliefs and things like that, it's like there's this, it's like this external pressure and internal pressure we create to rationalize our decisions. And then at the same time, they keep, even at the end, the thing about following your gut and how your gut can tell you kind of, even if it's telling you something, then we may still kind of act in a way where we're still trying to stay consistent with this thing that's maybe not even good for us anymore, but our gut is kind of saying the opposite. But that makes me think from, setting aside all of these things about being influenced and weapons of influence and these pressures and things like that, we have the ability to change. We have the ability to create new beliefs. We have the ability to have an awareness that these things are happening, even when we are ourselves doing it, right? When we're, it's like we can kind of be the person doing it and the observer of it. So kind of observing ourselves, maybe falling into trying to rationalize a decision that maybe isn't serving us anymore, right? But I mean, it's so interesting because it's like you can't almost separate it, like knowing that these things are being used within all aspects of our lives, right? Like commercially and just, in society, right? And then that internal drive or purpose or kind of following our gut and our heart as to where we want to go, right? I don't know. It's just, it makes you think like it's very open-ended, right? Because it's an ongoing thing we're learning, right? But I don't know. I don't even have a point. I find it like this like battle almost where, right, we can see it. And then at the same time, because we are here, all of us following a passion, following our heart, following something that is different from what most of society does, right? So we already are kind of going out of the mold and kind of going against the pressures of society to appear consistent within like this model that most people follow. We're doing something different. But even within this space, it's like same thing, right? We make certain decisions or create a self-image of even maybe being someone that maybe we think we're not successful, right? And then how does that shape our actions? Because I'm thinking also from like, Will's training and things like that, and how that self-image, we can rationalize certain actions, but maybe can't break through to another level, let's say in our business, because we've convinced ourselves and rationalized a certain self-image. I don't know. I just, it's kind of like blowing my mind.
Totally. One of the things that I also found fascinating, it kind of relates to that, is that it's like when we have these sort of automatic responses to things, it's like it's allowing us not to have to think, like to think things through or to think of the consequences of thinking. So it's sort of like when we just have these automatic responses to something and we just go down a path, then yeah, it's like protecting us from our own efforts of having to think, or our consequences of thinking, and really taking a good look at what we do or don't believe, or what we do or don't want. And so it's sort of like we just go into these automatic responses. So yeah, I think to me it's like, it's so lovely to have this awareness of these sort of innate kind of ways of operating, that consistency is such a crucial kind of part of how we operate. Just to have this understanding, I'm really loving this sense of awareness. So it's sort of like, yeah, sort of really feel like I can have that observer self. Notice that I do have automatic kind of responses or whatever, but also having that observer self more present, so we can just be more aware of the decisions, and more aware on how I'm being influenced, but also how I'm influencing people. Just sort of this sense of awareness around it all is so great. Oh, one other thing, following on from what Don was saying, sort of about, it makes me think of the all of us, if we've gone all in, if we've made that decision to invest in our business and in ourselves, that's sort of, to me, it's a bit of a rite of passage, really. That, like, just deciding to kind of check out the business or come in as a trial or something like that is one, decision. But there's something about if you've actually gone right and made a bigger decision, and generally there's some pain, it's something you go through to come up with that money, or to go through you're believing in yourself enough, or whatever it is that you go through to make that decision. For people who've done that, then generally are a lot more committed to their own process, their own journey, and to their business because of that process. So I just sort of was likening, that it's not hazing, it's not deliberate, like, that kind of stuff, but it's like it's a something that people need to make a decision around. Either way is fine, but it's sort of like you can resonate with everyone else who's made that decision. You can kind of, there's a sense of kind of understanding that it's a decision that you go through some journey around that seems to create more follow through or something like that. It just got me thinking around how it relates to this business as well.
Yeah. And like creating that self-image of being all in, like it's like that change or shift of how we view ourselves, and maybe being more capable of getting to the next level, and then having to fill out that form and send it in, right? And go through all the steps of doing that, even having to call your like credit card company, and like all of these like little steps leading up to like that process, right? And then actually going all in. Definitely there's like, this is, I don't know, it's just, yeah. Very interesting.
There's a bonding.
Yeah. And then there is something to it, right? Like that's part of like the culture building too that happens. And it changes the way that you interact with people in the business, with your prospects, and also how, I guess, you interact with your own business. Right? It's different. There's the rationalization has to be, you have to make it work. You have to. Right? So, if you guys anyone else wants to jump on, jump out. But I'm just gonna, if anyone just jump out. But I wanted to go into, it's on page 92, the inner choice. Right, this idea of taking that inner responsibility, right, of bringing to that point of, I don't know, and this is like a process. Like I look at like our business, right, and how it's kind of like all these things that we already went through in the previous chapters kind of come together here. I think because we're talking about links and like having a person actually ask you for it instead of you just kind of shoving it in someone's face, right? There's like a whole process that's happening. And even like with what they're doing with the daily shortcut now, it's like there's that exchange happening. Like I'm fascinated with this in terms of how Dave Wood applies these things, because I know he does, right? And he applies these things into like marketing. And even for us, we applied it in ours, and it just shifted a lot of things where, as much as possible, trying to have the other person be responsible for their questions almost, and the actions that they take. So if I ask them, they're asking me for help, well, I'm going to ask them, can they watch this video, or can they do this thing first before I even go to the next step? And then I have them ask me for the link. So I'll ask, do you want it? I won't just send it. And like these little things, right? And then even within our email list, hi, Leslie. Welcome.
Hey, sorry.
Even within our email list, one thing we did that really drastically changed a lot of things for us was that our first email primarily does not sell. It does not sell anything. It's more about getting the primary focus of our first email is to get the people to respond back. That's what we want. That's all we want. We want them to give us their time to sit down and to respond to that first email. And our first email asks, kind of like, what are your dreams, and what, how can we help you, or something like that. And there was a point where, we were kind of marketing with a different kind of autoresponder where it was a lot of pitching. And we were learning, we didn't know what we were really doing. And so we weren't getting responses to our emails, maybe once, like a sentence here or there, or, unsubscribes, right? With some nice comments, but not nice, right? And then we shifted and we changed that first email where it was very different and was very focused on that person. And then all of a sudden we started receiving these emails with like paragraphs of like people telling us their life story about them, who they are, what they want, their dreams. And it was like this shift. And then afterwards, those people that had sent emails, they opened more. They responded more to emails. They responded more to anything we sent, and were more likely to join us, right? And it's like that exchange of them giving us their time, right? Which I think is even more valuable than anything, than money, right? Because the person is sitting and actually kind of going through these steps of making a commitment of writing something out about them and sharing something that can be vulnerable, which you normally don't share with strangers. But here people were doing that, right? And then we're in a position now where we can build that further through rapport, right? But constantly making it so that it's like that inner choice that person is making to provide information, right? So I don't know, like this idea of like that jujitsu where it's like, you don't really do too much, right? And then the other person kind of does more, and that evokes that commitment, right? And that need to stay consistent with that. So yeah. Leslie, did you want to pop out with anything about this chapter? Do you have any thoughts about it? Oh, you're muted.
Am I better now? Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I love the social jujitsu. I thought that was hysterical. That cracked me up when I listened to it. And it was interesting that they pulled parenting into it and the children's part of it, at least on I listened to it on tape today. So that part I thought was really kind of interesting that they connected it with parenting, because yes, the children would play with the robot, but if they thought it was their own idea, they wouldn't be playing with the robot. I thought that was really, you're like, oh yeah, that's why that works. It's kind of enlightening on how to be a better parent, and then you can link it to your business and whatnot. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a funny story. And then how it like, yeah. I don't know if I don't have children. I have cats. But they do what they want all the time. Alicia, Elizabeth, do you guys have any thoughts or anything you want to input? Anything that stood out to you in the chapter? No, one thing, because I actually wrote in my book, and there was another part that stood out to me. Sorry, guys.
While you're finding that, you touched on the, like with your email stuff, like the written of people writing down. that's something that stood out to me, just especially in those examples of in the prisoner camps and stuff like that, getting people to write little things, and then they sort of want to stay committed to just the power of the written and documenting somehow your thought, whatever you're documenting your thoughts, then you kind of, there's this drive to stay committed or to stand by that. Like I was kind of saying in the beginning, but there's something about it being written down and it being sort of able to be visible by someone else, to be seen, whether it's, written or video or whatever. But if it can be witnessed publicly, then you're even more likely to want to follow through with whatever it is. I thought that was fascinating. So I think where that can really help us is, hi Patricia, just so those little written things of, responding to an email or, having that sort of checklist that you sort of fill in and write out once you've gone through those first 4 steps in the process in our business. Just those little things are actually, really powerful for people's journey around committing to their own dreams or this as a vehicle potentially, or just that's in a positive way of how that actually can help them follow through that writing things down and it being witnessed by someone else. They're more likely to feel like, I'm going to follow through on this.
Yeah. So I actually misquoted. It was because then most people know the quote, because this is where the chapter comes from. Consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. It's actually a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. Right? And because it's under the whole chapter of how to say no, right? And, this is that, I guess, that interesting part where having that self-awareness, right? And understanding these things, and when we're acting in a way where we're just, succumbing to these pressures of wanting to stay consistent, but it's not working for us, and then really following our gut and being able to make that choice of stepping away, right? I mean, I think about like when Romeo and I were living in Toronto, and he was the fast food manager, and he like ran the store. Like the guy just depended on him to run this whole business. And he made him a lot of money. He ran everything. Like he would go on vacation, Romeo, and then come back and have to pick up, like after just a week, like a ton of things would go wrong. And so he was very consistent in that. And then for me too, like we built this life, and it was, and I can understand now these fears and these feelings of pressure where everyone told us that we were crazy for wanting to do what we wanted to do, which was just to quit our jobs and to sell everything and just, they're all like, we're checking out of society. Right? We're like taking the easy route and just giving up. Like that's how people perceived it and viewed us, right? And so there's still kind of, there was this need or want to prove them otherwise and say, no, of course not. And almost this need to continue staying consistent because there's a need to stay, I don't know, like something to prove. Like maybe staying in that route, we had something to prove still, or reach a certain level of success in that and get more stuff and more, pay for more things to work for that we didn't even really want. And it's funny how, I mean, it was our close friends and family. And so the pressure was huge. I mean, I remember sitting on our floor in our condo, like, are we crazy? Like, are we just freaking losing it? Right? And terrified because we didn't know anyone that had done what we wanted to do. And all this external pressure to just continue what we were doing, right? And it's funny because we had tried previously to do that. I mean, Romeo had, wanted to quit earlier and was given another opportunity and another job to do something different, but he didn't, and we stayed. And so here we were again, and it's like, even the consistency, sometimes, I think we have certain patterns in action where we do certain things all the time, and this idea of constantly giving up on our dream year after year after year became something consistent, and can even kind of, seep into self-image where I believed that I could no longer really do it because I hadn't. And we kept talking about it, but we weren't doing it, right? And so that point where we decided to do it, I still didn't believe it because our previous actions had been consistent with something so different and all this pressure too, right? So it's interesting, but it proves too that you can break, right? You can break away from that pressure, and even from that internal pressure to want to appear a certain way in front of people, right? Where everyone thinks what you're doing is horrible, right? I mean, that's not, it wasn't an easy thing for me to live with, right? But, eventually kind of got over it. And even now people still think that, but for me, it's already different. My self-image has changed into what I'm capable of. And now it's like continuing that. I don't know. I find this really fascinating because there's so many layers as to how we can apply it to our life and to our business and to parenting, to just anything, relationships, and also even understanding, our prospects and our team members, because people may want to do something, but they're just not ready to do that. And maybe they're not ready to break away from something that they've been very consistent in. And they're still feeling that pressure from maybe their friends and family and their, community, where they just can't. Maybe they can't join the business yet because of that. And it's not something that maybe they might be negative to you, but really it's just maybe they're having that inner turmoil and struggle between an image they created, kind of, trying to be consistent with this way of being. And here's an entirely different way of doing things, starting a new business online, right? And it's not what most people do. And so the pressure is enormous, I think. And so sometimes people they're not ready to break away, right? And follow that gut. So I think it's good. And even understanding team members, and everyone's kind of at a different point in their journey as to what they're ready to tackle or ready to take on in terms of, these pressures that we feel externally and internally, right? And the internal ones, I think, this shows how strong they are and how much they can direct our action, even if our gut is saying something totally different, right? So I don't know. I find it fascinating. But anyone want to pop out? Anyone else want to, any kind of closing? Oh, Leslie, I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
It just takes a minute to kick in. I think what you just said is really insightful. When we want to help people to discover their true passion and live their true life, we have some tools in our toolbox that we learned about a little bit more today. This doesn't have to be used for evil, for communism and things like that. But if those tools work in communism and something that we don't value and we don't think is right, how much more are they going to work when people really want to make the change? We can help them make the change by using these tools of influence. They don't have to be bad tools, but we can help people make the change that they've said that they want to make by using some of these tools in our toolbox. Just add them to your toolbox, and anything you use can be good or evil. A hammer can build a house or it can tear it down. Choose which way you want to use it. So I found it very insightful that I could be helping my teammates a little bit more with some of these techniques.
Yeah, for sure. I love that analogy of the hammer. That's exactly, because it can be used both ways. And I think all of us here are, we're here because we followed that gut. We followed our heart. And so I think that approach to things, helping others to do the same, being able to know this and have this awareness is fantastic. So thank you guys. Anyone else want to pop out? Last kind of closing thoughts, statement?
I was just going to say that being able to internalize your reasons for doing anything is helps you go along. So, and like when as you build team members, they have to internalize a reason why they're doing whatever it is they're doing. It can't just be because they have to meet a quota or, and I thought it was interesting talking about, like, again, somebody else mentioned the parenting thing, where you don't just intimidate people into doing stuff. You have to have buy-in, because otherwise you might get compliance while you're standing over them, but they're not going to walk away and do it. So you got to internalize stuff. And the other thing was just about, I guess, the dependence on, like, whether outside or inside pressure is greater. And I found myself guilty of doing stuff where, you know, where my gut feeling was like, yeah, this doesn't sound like a good idea. And yet everybody else was doing it. The how do I say, the revered leader was doing it. And so it almost makes you question yourself, like, well, you know, your reason, how you feel or how you see things, that sometimes it'll make you question yourself, because, well, you know, President so-and-so or whatever is doing it, instead of just going with, because we do have the internal, what do you call it, wherewithal to direct our own path, but sometimes we can get sucked into going with the group because they're all doing it, even though you don't think it's a great idea, if that makes any sense. If I wasn't just rambling there.
No, for sure, Elizabeth. Yeah, it's fantastic. Everything you said is very, very insightful. And yeah, it's totally true that being able to kind of tap into people's why, so that
Right.
walking away, they have that drive, because it is their choice. It is their own inner choice to do whatever they want to do. And if, you know, you take away the person kind of trying to get them to do it, and that person isn't there, that decision and that inner responsibility has to continue the action. So definitely, you know, following gut and listening to our heart is super, super important. And I think that's the ability to say no, right? To say no to these pressures, and having the awareness, first of all, that they're there, right, internally and externally, and then just having the resolve to follow the gut, right, to follow our heart. So
Right.
fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for sharing.
You're welcome.
And well, shall we end it here?
An hour and a half for the next thing.
Okay, so, you know, thank you guys so much for coming on. I love our discussions here. I always have so much to think about and processing right now. And next week, we're going to continue on with the next chapter 4, which is social proof. And same time, same bat channel, Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern. See you guys, and thanks for watching the replay. You know, if you guys have any anything to add or any feedback or questions, just post them in the comments, and we can always address them kind of on the next one. So thanks, guys. Have a fantastic day. See you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody. It was